Welcome to The Definitive Wrap, where we report the truth about American exceptionalism. We love our flag, we love our country, and we believe in America. The Definitive Wrap, where we respect people of faith, the men and women in blue, and our support for Israel. And now your hosts, Baila Sebro, she's the nice one, and Alan Skorsky. He's not so nice. But together they are The Definitive Wrap.
I'm Alan Skorsky with my co-host Baila Sebro, and welcome to a special campaign edition of the Definitive Wrap podcast. The Definitive Wrap is proud to be the official podcast of VinNews.com. This year, one of the most important races in New York City will be for City Comptroller. Today, we are honored to have with us David Weprin, whom Baila will introduce shortly, a man who has a long and distinguished career of public service and is running for comptroller. Some of you may be asking, why do I care who the comptroller is? It's a position which is usually behind the scenes. So let me tell you why it is imperative that every registered Democrat must vote for David Weprin, with early voting starting this Sunday. 1, David has more experience than any of his opponents, and during our interview today, David will elaborate on that. Speaking of his opponents, and I hate to even mention their names, is Brad Lander, a supporter of the BDS movement against Israel and is endorsed by AOC. And during the debate, he actually boasted of having the endorsement of one of the most anti-Semitic members of Congress. A vote for Lander is a victory for AOC, Bernie Sanders, and every one of her squad members in Washington. Another opponent whose name I would rather not mention, but we must know who will harm us to understand the importance of voting for someone who will support us. And that is Corey Johnson, who led the campaign to expel Chaim Deitch from the city council. I do not have to remind any of you about all of the anti-Semitic attacks and vandalism against shuls, yeshivas, and Jewish-owned businesses for you to understand that anyone who supports defunding the police is someone who will shrug their shoulders when Jews are attacked. David Weprin is the only candidate who opposes defunding the police. David is the only Shomer Shabbos candidate running for citywide office. And I don't have to explain to our audience why David Weprin's election is critical for New York City, but especially for the Jewish community. During our interview, David will elaborate on why he is running, why he is unequivocally the only qualified candidate running for a comptroller, and why early voting, which begins this Sunday, is so critical for the Jewish community. Baila?
Thank you, Alan. How does an average citizen choose a candidate? The answer is to look and study the positions they take on as personal issues because it affects their life and the life of their loved ones, and also look and study at the proven leadership qualities and experience they bring into office. Assemblymember David Weprin is a lifelong New Yorker, born and raised in Queens, the son of a Cuban Jewish immigrant mother and Brooklyn-born father. He has dedicated his life to public service because he believes that throughout everything New Yorkers have been through, it's about time someone stood up for us. In the City Council and State Assembly, he passed groundbreaking legislation to help seniors, children, and middle-class families. Now, with the city going through the worst financial crisis in history, he's the only candidate running for a comptroller with a relevant finance experience to get us through and emerge stronger than before. David is running to be our next city comptroller to stand up for working and middle-class New Yorkers, protect pensions, and get us back on track. David Weprin is an observant Jew and a father and grandfather of Jewish children and grandchildren. He is the only candidate running for comptroller with the necessary municipal financial experience, having balanced the city's budget as chair of the City Council's Finance Committee for 8 consecutive years. He guided the city's finances through the post-9/11 recession and the 2008 recession. Previously in his public service career, Mr. Weprin served as the Deputy Superintendent of Banks and Secretary of the Banking Board for New York State. Currently chair of the New York State Assembly's Committee on Correction, Weprin has championed critical legislation reforming our criminal justice system. He has authored groundbreaking legislation, including the Adoptee Bill of Rights and the Religious Garb Bill, and has made standing up for middle-class New Yorkers a central theme of his campaign for comptroller. Without doubt, David Weprin is admirably prepared to serve as New York City Comptroller. David Weprin, it gives me great honor to welcome you to the Definitive Wrap.
Thank you, Baila, and thank you, Alan. I should probably just sit down with those wonderful introductions. You gave my whole stump speech.
Well, we're not done yet. David, despite what people might think, being a city comptroller is far from being the most glamorous job. With the city in a precarious financial state, your role is more important than ever. The city comptroller is responsible for auditing city spending, watching out for waste, as well as overseeing pension funds for more than 600,000 current and retired municipal workers. As opposed to your opponent, who was going after the NYPD budget and championing the priorities of the city's left, please share some of your strategies with our listening and viewing audience. How will you handle this fiscal mess?
Thank you very much, Baila. Yeah, we actually are going to be okay for this coming budget because of the aid we got from Washington, which helped us at the state level in April and the city level in July 1st. So we won't have a deficit this year, but we're actually anticipating a $4 to $5 billion deficit every year, starting in a year. And we can't spend all the stimulus money now. We have to reserve some of it and make sure it's allocated properly. And that's something that as controller, we can audit. But, as you mentioned with my finance experience, it's very important that we have someone who's controller has the background to do a few things. One is to, audit city agencies, but and invest pension fund money, because there are 5 pension funds totaling $254 billion. So it's actually over a quarter of $1 trillion. And some of my opponents are planning on using those pension funds for political statements. And that's something I'm opposed to. I think it's important as a fiduciary obligation to invest that pension funds, that we do it based on getting the best returns on assets. That's something I did on Wall Street. I was on Wall Street for 25 years with major firms. I also chaired the Securities Industry Association New York District, which is a trade group, elected by my peers, a non-paying job. And I know finance, and I know asset management, and it's important that we get the best returns on our assets. My mom, who you referred to, just turned 91, the Cuban Jewish immigrant. And she has a teacher's pension. And she's when she came here from Cuba, my grandparents were originally from Lithuania, her parents, but she was born in Cuba. And she only spoke 2 languages when she came here. She spoke Spanish and Yiddish, because those were the languages that were spoken in her home.
It was my first language, so.
But she went to, our schools. She met my father at Brooklyn College, became a public high school teacher, and now she has that pension. So I certainly will not be playing political politics or making political statements by divesting from this, divesting from that, forcing companies to change their management decisions for various political reasons. It should be based on getting the best returns on the asset. Because, if nothing else, the city of New York guarantees New York City pensioners a 7% return, which is fine. But there are plenty of years when it falls below 7%. And we don't know what the climate of these investments are going to be, or whether we'll have another recession, whether we'll have a Wall Street crisis as we did in 2008, one of the years that I served as chair of the Finance Committee in the City Council and balanced a budget with a multi-billion-dollar deficit. So if we fall below that 7%, it's up to the City of New York general budget to make up the difference. And that could be in billions of dollars. And that would be on top of the multi-billion-dollar deficit that we're expecting, the $4 to $5 billion deficit. So that could go back to the 70s. I don't know if you remember in the mid 70s. You're not old enough to know this, but when I was around in the mid 70s. And, there were libraries and schools that were built but never opened because they couldn't afford it. As a matter of fact, the Young Israel Jamaica Estates, Baila, was started out using the library on Union Turnpike off of 188th Street that never opened because of the fiscal crisis. And my late father, who was Speaker of the Assembly, Saul Weprin, actually arranged for the Young Israel Jamaica Estates to use the library as a temporary headquarters without charge. And that's where they started the Young Israel Jamaica Estates, when they were building a new building on 188th Street at the time. So, I'm obviously proud of that background, but we can't go back to the 70s and the fiscal crisis. So it's very important that we get a good return for our pensioners. One of the other things I've been saying is that we need to have a more frequent audit schedule. The city charter only requires the controller to audit some aspect of every city agency once every 4 years. I think we should strive to audit every agency every year. There are a lot of wasteful spending and places that have never been audited. Mayor de Blasio's wife runs one of those multi-billion-dollar new agencies called Thrive New York. That agency has not been audited. That should be audited, as well as some of the large outside contracting budget. The outside contracting budget of the city of New York now is about 20% of the overall budget. And the budget in the city is now almost $100 billion. It's 98.6. 98.6 may be a good number if you're taking your temperature. I'm not so sure if such a good number when you have such a huge increase from the year before of the city budget. So that's something I certainly would try to get a handle on. We have to, have fiscal responsibility. And I'm very proud. And one of the major problems in the city, not directly related to the controller's office, but it is because public safety and crime going up, and gun violence and robberies and crimes all over the city. That's killing our tourism. Why would people want to come here when they could come to Times Square and be hit by a stray bullet? It's absurd, and it has to do with the losing 3,000 police officers from a year ago because two of my opponents led the movement to defund the police and to cut the police budget by $1 billion. And they're talking about cutting it even more. Surely the killing of George Floyd was a tragedy, but you shouldn't demonize an entire police department, which is probably one of the best police departments of any city in the world, certainly for something that happened in another state. So it's unfortunate that NYPD has been demonized, and we've lost 2,000 police officers to attrition. We lost 1,000 in the budget last year, and then another 2,000 to attrition. So we're down 3,000 police officers. And until we restore the police to its full, we had another crime problem. I don't know if you remember, in the early 90s. I feel like a historian. In the early 90s, when Dinkins
that's great.
When Dinkins was mayor, and I don't know if you remember, there was a tourist. I don't remember what state he was from, but it was I think somewhere in the Midwest. And he was visiting here for the U.S. Open, and he was stabbed on the subway. And then there was headlines in the Post and the Daily News.
His mother,
Dave, do something. And sure enough, they created. My father was involved in that as Speaker of the Assembly. They started a Safe Streets, Safe City program, and then crime went down. And what did that Safe Streets, Safe City program? The biggest part of that component was adding 5,000 new police officers, not cutting police. And it also had issues dealing with mental illness and social workers and other people, other money for programs in addition to the police. It wasn't just the police, but the police was the centerpiece of it, adding 5,000 police. So the answer is not to have less police. And that's why actually I've been endorsed by every police union. I've been endorsed by the PBA, as well as the captains, lieutenants, the sergeants, and the detectives union, 5 separate unions of police, and they've all endorsed me. And actually, they've said also, in addition to my saying how important it is to maintain public safety and not demonizing the police, they also say that they're 20% of the pension money, and I'm the best person to invest that money. my opponents would keep talking about pensions of city employees, but they always seem to leave out the police. And I'm not embarrassed to leave out the police. I think, they're basically the ones that are keeping us safe. And I'd like to see more police, not less police.
So, David, you just
Absolutely.
gave a fantastic answer because you answered the question I was going to ask you about the pension and because of crime and because of tourism. So I'm going to go in a different direction then. We've lost thousands of residents to Florida. Now, besides tourism being one of New York's top tax resources, we are the entertainment capital of America, the fashion capital, the business capital. We have so much revenue, and yet we've lost so many thousands of people. I remember years ago, and I think it was Mike Bloomberg who said that they were going to tax Long Islanders who work in New York because it's an honor to come in to work in New York. Well, now with all of the crime, people here and with COVID, people have learned that they can work from home. So my question is, how are we going to reverse everyone that we've lost? There's the crime issue. There's bringing back tourism, which is a police function. There's having people not leave here anymore, because if they can go to Florida where there's no state income tax, why are they staying here unless we are making it a hospitable place for people to live again?
Well, we have to reduce taxes to a certain extent. Certainly we can't tax the way out of this problem. We have to create new industries. I was a strong supporter of bringing Amazon to Queens, to Long Island City, because it would have created, as a headquarters, second headquarters, it would have created 25,000 high-paying jobs with an average salary of 150,000. We need more Amazons back in New York, and it was actually two of my opponents. You can guess who they are. Basically, not wanting Amazon here and fighting to keep Amazon out of New York City. Can you imagine how we could have used those 25,000 high-paying jobs right now in New York City? So we have to look to create new industries, new tax base, new revenue that we wouldn't have had otherwise, and that's what we really have to do.
Right.
So I know
David,
go ahead.
You've been
go
a
ahead.
strong advocate.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
David, you've been a strong advocate for religious freedoms, and you passed a religious garb bill, which prevents public and private employers from discriminating against employees with religious garb. Can you share with us how big a problem is wearing religious garb on the job? And have you ever been asked to intercede in a situation of this kind?
I have. It's actually a law that affects many different religions and communities. It certainly affects the Hasidic community in particular, and the Orthodox community with yarmulkes and beards, included facial hair, by the way. So for religious reasons. So many of the uniform agencies like police, fire, corrections, have had these policies about not having beards more than an inch or something. You could have a nicely trimmed beard, but you can't have a beard over a certain period. That is no longer allowed if someone's religion requires them. So it's the Jewish religion in some cases, the Hasidic and Orthodox population, but it's also the Sikh population. Sikhs is a separate religion. It's one of the newer religions. It originated in India, a little over 500 years ago, and I represent Richmond Hill, which is like the pocket of the largest Sikh population in the Northeast. And Sikhs have been discriminated against for years, wearing beards and turbans. And as a matter of fact, there was a Sikh individual. He was actually a convert to Sikhism from Catholicism. He was a Irish Catholic, born an Irish Catholic, Kevin Harrington, and he took on Kevin Harrington Singh, and he used to drive the E-train. He was the operator of the E-train at the front of the train, and the E-train, for those, if you remember, drove right into the World Trade Center. And during 9/11, Kevin Harrington Singh was a hero because he actually saved lives of people that were fleeing the World Trade Center. And he drove his train backwards and forwards and let people on and actually saved lives during 9/11. So you think the MTA would have given him an award, promoted him? No, they fired him. And why did they do that? Because MTA got hundreds of calls from average citizens saying that there was a terrorist driving the E-train right after 9/11. And why did they say he was a terrorist? Because he looked like Osama bin Laden with the beard and a turban. and it was actually a different religion. He wasn't Muslim. He was, he was Sikh, which is a separate religion. They're actually like Nazirim in our religion. They don't cut their hair from birth. They don't shave, and they often tie their beards up because they're so long. But they put their hair under their turban and they tie it up because the hair grows from birth. They don't drink wine. There's a lot of similarities, but certainly it's a religion. It's a recognized religion, and nobody should be discriminated against for their religion.
David, you were the only candidate to talk about spreading out your department, because it's no one knows this, or at least most people don't, that the comptroller's office has 800 people, and you came up with the idea that you were going to spread them out into different boroughs to help foster small business. And as you know, small business is the backbone of America. Can you tell us, besides making it easier, obviously, for people to start businesses, what are some of the handicaps that people in New York have had until now, and how can you change that to make it more viable and easier to start a business here in New York?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question, Alan. We're a 5-borough city. We should be a 5-borough controller's office, and I'm committed to opening up an office in every borough, specifically geared to helping people in the community, but also helping small businesses, which actually make up over 50% of all the employment in New York City come out of small business. And I want to use those borough offices to focus on the small businesses in every borough, and all the various ethnic communities as well, and who may have unique needs. And we really have to bring back small businesses before we can bring back the economy. And that's why I think it's important to spread out some of those employees and to have these borough offices that are more accessible, by the way. It's very hard to make an appointment at the controller's office. All the jobs, all the people in the controller's office are headquartered in the municipal building right near City Hall. And it's kind of like a fortress. It's a security fortress, and it's hard to get in. You can't just walk in off the street. You have to have an appointment. I would obviously we take normal precautions, but you shouldn't have to spend months trying to get an appointment. It should be accessible to the public in each borough.
David, can you please tell us about the Adoptee Bill of Rights?
Yeah, that's another one of my important pieces of legislation that became law. For years, it was actually the law in New York State since 1938, and it just changed a year ago when the governor signed my bill. It basically allows adult adoptees, when I say adult, when they become 18 years of age, to have access to their original birth certificate. And most people don't even know this. I didn't know this when I was first contacted by a series of adoptee advocates, and it's a national movement to have your birth certificate, which was sealed in many states. Now there are about 14 or 15 states that now have allowed adoptees to have access to the original birth certificate. As you all know, it's happened to all of us. And even when you go to the doctor's office, the first question people ask you is, what's your family history of heart disease, diabetes, cancer? We get this all the time when you go to a doctor, or certainly if you have some kind of a medical emergency, that's the first question that's asked. If you're an adoptee, you don't know what your biological medical history is. It's really based on biology and genes. And now, through this new law, people have reunited families. They've discovered who their birth parents are, and they've also discovered that they have siblings that they didn't know about. And we've reunited families. But you really, and one of the advocates that helped get the bill passed, that I involved in the advocacy, was the Agudath Israel of America, because they felt strongly that there was a real danger for people not knowing their biological parents or siblings, because you could have siblings marrying each other not knowing it because of being adopted and being secret. And birth certificates were sealed at adoption since 1938 in New York State. And this bill, to change that, wasn't my original bill. It was around the legislature for 50 years. But I'm proud that I'm the one that actually got it passed and signed into law for the first time.
David, besides doing our podcast, I know that you're on the campaign trail morning till night, meeting with every New Yorker. Is there any one top or two issues that keep coming up more than anything else that you are, qualified, to resolve that the other ones are not?
Absolutely, but I'll correct you a little bit, Alan. It's 24/6 because I'm a Shabbos observer. But I even on Shabbos though I end up going to multiple shuls, and people always have issues anyway. So I don't know if that counts. I guess rabbis work on Shabbos, so I guess in that
Right.
sense, I do get a lot of issues in shul. And I belong to two Young Israels, the Young Israel of Jamaica Estates and the Young Israel of Holliswood. I'm kind of in between the two. We're right next to each other. But yes, there are a lot of issues. One is, the pension funds, as I said, very important. $254 billion, and it's important that they be invested professionally and not to make political statements or to divest from this, divest from that, and it's a slippery slope. Once you divest from one thing and make political statements, not companies that don't give health care, or companies that don't treat women or minorities properly. I mean, these are all good things to do, but it shouldn't be. The investment in the pension funds should not be contingent on making political statements. You are one of three citywide officials, and you certainly can speak out on those type of issues, but it shouldn't be at the expense of our. It's actually 704,000 pensioners, both current and retired.
Mm-hmm.
So it certainly is. The economy and our potential budget deficits because of COVID-19. That's probably the biggest issue that keeps coming back and forth. And how are we going to recover? The borough offices, I think, are a good start, but we really have to bring back the economy, bring back small businesses, and deal with public safety. Because if public safety is not controlled, and we have these constant shootings and and gun violence all over the city, it's going to affect the real estate market. It's going to affect every aspect of small business. It's going to affect tourism, which is one of our biggest industries and has kind of dried up during the pandemic. It was beginning to come back a little bit. We really have to bring it back. So these are some of the issues that come up. But we're right at the primary. Actually, as you mentioned, early voting starts on Sunday, and the Democratic primary is June 22nd. But the mayor's race has been getting a lot of publicity, but the controller's race has kind of been below the radar. But I certainly think I am the one that has the only one that has the public and private sector finance experience. It's not just public, but it's private sector finance experience. And I think it's important to have both.
Right. David, I just want to go back to something that was touched upon. I understand that you propose to open a comptroller office in each borough so that small businesses and organizations that have contracts with the city do not have to schlep into the city to address an issue they might have. And that's a great idea. Can you tell us about that and how you will choose who heads each office?
Well, we got to get elected first.
Yeah, but still, how do you propose to do it? Yeah, we want
to try to pick people from each borough. We want to take people from the community and staff from the community. So, obviously it'd be good if we had somebody that had experience in the small business community. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. But that's another major decision is who you're going to hire as the chief investment officer, which is like the top staff position. That advises the various pension funds on potential investments. I mean, you need a team of people, but you need one particular professional, and that person should be chosen on professional investment history, not based on political reasons or political purposes. So, that's also a major part of investing the pension funds.
Okay, great, right.
David, if we have time for another question, I've been living in New York now for about 30 years, and I've never seen the attacks on Orthodox Jews, especially in Brooklyn. And once upon a time, at least earlier when I was here, there were politicians always came out and they always condemned it in the strongest terms. And we mentioned, and I don't have to mention your opponents, but, Chaim Deutsch, got harassed by members of the council. Kalman Yeager did. What is happening? Are Jews being dismissed? Are we being treated less seriously, with less respect? What is your take on that? And how do we turn that around?
Well, I've been speaking out. I actually introduced a bill to, unfortunately, it didn't pass yet, but it would basically, there's this no bail law for only applies to misdemeanors. And there are certain categories that are, exempt from that, where they have to have bail. Felonies are in that category, and other, violent crimes. But I introduced a bill to add any hate crime to that, even if it's a misdemeanor, because it may just be a swastika one day, but that can lead to violence. And somebody shouldn't commit one act and get out right away. There should be consequences. There should even be jail time for these type of acts, because they're not harmless acts. They're not acts of vandalism. They're hate, and one thing leads to another. Yeah, it seems, unfortunately, that there's open season on Jews, and I guess the reason why it's more Orthodox Jews, because they're more visibly Jewish, with either yarmulkes or beards or hats, and they look Jewish, so they're discriminated against, as opposed to not knowing if someone's Jewish or not. So it's unfortunate. I've been advocating against hate crimes everywhere. And that's another reason why we need a strength in the police department. Hate crimes units should be increased, not decreased. And it's important. You can't send, social workers to violent situations. And that's what a lot of people are arguing. We should eliminate the police and just hire social workers, because most of the people committing these crimes, have mental illness. That's great. But do you want a situation? And there are even candidates talking about disarming the police, not having them carry guns because of a couple of lone incidents. Right. When the hardworking men and women of the NYPD put on their uniforms every day, they endanger their lives every single day to protect us. A lot of families don't know if they're going to come back when they put on that uniform in the morning. Certainly, based on some stuff that's been happening this year. So I think it's important that the police prosecute, or investigate these hate crimes, and the district attorneys prosecute them for the full extent of the law, and take it very seriously. We're not talking acts of vandalism or various words. We're talking about, even if it is words or vandalism, it leads to more serious hate crimes. And it seems to me like it's open season, and I think we have to turn that around.
Right.
We are out of time, David. Thank you for joining us today. I will say that with everything going on, now is the time for the Jewish community to unite and help elect David Weprin to the second highest office in the city.
And early voting is when again, Baila?
Early voting is this coming Sunday. Only a candidate that understands, lives, and feels the issues is the one qualified to go out and do the job right. Thank you to our audience for tuning in. Again, thank you, David. And thank you to vinnews.com for our show being their official podcast.
Okay, thank you.
Have a wonderful
Thank you,
Shabbos and a
Baila.
great weekend, and good luck
Thank you,
to
Alan.
you. You'll be great. I know it.
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Thanks for listening to The Definitive Wrap with your hosts, Baila Sebro and Alan Skorsky. Be sure to tell your family and friends they also can listen to The Definitive Wrap on Apple Music, Spotify, Google Play, and your favorite streaming service. See you next time on The Definitive Wrap.